But I will say this, James Harden is the greatest scorer in the game today. This brother is something special. He's that sensational.
32 consecutive games of 30 points plus. Once upon a time, James Harden was the most unguardable scorer in the league. Hi, my name is Rotimi. I talk all things basketball. I love basketball, and I hope one day you can share that same love with me. With reports mentioning that James Harden is likely to go back to the Houston Rockets, in this video we're going to reminisce over James Harden's glory days, from the 17 to 20 season, where he averaged over 30 points a game. Notably, in the 2 seasons prior to the 17 season, he did actually average 29 points a game. However, it was only until he broke into the 30 points that the conversations really started to heat up about him becoming MVP. In the 17-18 season, he averaged 30 points. In the 18-19 season, he averaged 36 points, winning him the MVP. He was the first person to average over 35 points since Kobe Bryant in the 05-06 season. In the 19-20 season, he averaged 34 points. He had 3 main shots: his step back 3, his layup, and the free throw. So James Harden had an element of shiftiness to his game that wouldn't allow you to get any close to him. Otherwise, you got too close, it was a foul. Even though you knew what he was going to do, you could never stop him. Teams were using unheard tactics to guard this man. I'm talking people guarded him with no hands. Sometimes they even guarded him from the side. And then other times, people just were blatantly fouling the guy. None of it worked. His uncanny ability to draw fouls came from those 3 shots. The way his shooting form was built, at the end of his shot, he would flick his legs out. And him flicking his legs out meant that if a defender was too close when closing out, they would foul him. That either led to 3 points and a free throw, or it was 3 straight free throws, depending on if he made the 3-point or not. His handle to this day is one of the best in the game. He had a signature between the legs, like repeat that he had going on, that would literally lull a defender to sleep. And the next thing you know, as soon as he's got 20 seconds off the clock, this man would take a step back and he would shoot that thing. Now, his step back was interesting. He'd take 2 steps back. Why? So he changed the game. Basically, there was the gather step. The gather step is when you pick the ball up. You're allowed to take a step during that gather, and then you can take another step. So he then revolutionized the game because they knew it's a great way of drawing fouls, and not only that, it's a great way of creating space. In the 18-19 season, he took over 1,000 3-point shots. 54% of his shots were threes, and he actually made 37% of his shot. Now, you were lucky if he didn't want to get to his step back. If you didn't want to get to his step back and he wanted to blow by you, you know what? Your job as a defender, calm. It's pretty much fine at this point. It's whoever's guarding the rim. And guess what? You might as well let him score because he's going to draw the foul. He's going to flick his head back and throw his hands up in the air. And next thing you know, that's 2 shots to the free throw line. Across those 3 seasons, 28% of his points came from free throws. He was an 86, over those 3 seasons, he was an 86% shooter. He converted 86% of them. This man literally averaged 11 free throws a game and would make 9 of them, at least. 25% of his shots came from layups, and he would actually convert 54% of them. This literally made him unstoppable at the rim. And during that time, he was in shape enough to dunk the ball. So if you were unlucky on that day and he just decided that he wanted to fly, he would dunk the ball on you, wipe his nose and say, "Oh my gosh, high altitude," or he would just scream in your face. Many teams could not handle the fact that James Harden was getting so many free throws. And that would literally be decided between winning the game or losing the game. I remember watching James Harden matches thinking, damn, like, they're just going to foul him. And it's not even going to be their fault because he's so good at drawing it or making it look like they fouled him. To the point where you'd be worried that against James Harden, your team might lose in the regular season because who was going to get fouled out? His 18-19 season was definitely the worst. And I tell you that now, those 36 points that he was averaging was so deadly to any team. He was on a streak. As mentioned already, he went 32 games with 30 plus points. Majority of the time, if your team does that, if your star does that, you've got a huge chance of winning that game because he's performing and outperforming everyone. He even had 50-point games, and if you just happen to be there for the 50-point night, oh my gosh, you just know that he literally dropped 9 or 7 triples on you. His scoring was not the only part to his game. What also made him a frustrating player was the way that his team played. His job was to penetrate defense. As soon as he would get into the defense, get within that 3-point line, it was likely that he was going to draw another man. Then his job was to kick the ball out to another shooter for them to score. Not only was he good at that, but Del Morey, the GM, and Mike D'Antoni, the coach, were so good at selecting and finding these players. These players were just elite three-point shooters. We're talking about PJ Tucker. I'm pretty sure led the league in right corner threes for about 3-4 years because he's just so efficient from that corner clip. James Harden's usage rate was 40.1. Now that is the second highest usage rate in NBA history. This team was built around him, and to make up for his lack of defense, all of these players were great defenders as well. They ran the stats and they knew that if they had run every single offensive play through James Harden, they were guaranteed to make the playoffs. They did so much through James Harden to get their wins on the offensive side of the ball. In the regular season, James Harden's teams had shown that they were contenders, but the true test would come in the playoffs. In the 2017-18 season, James Harden's team had acquired Chris Paul. Their team's record going into the playoffs was 65-17. This team looked like the team to do it, the team that was going to knock off the Golden State Warriors. After beating Utah and Minnesota in the first 2 rounds, which left them in the Western Conference Finals against KD and the Warriors. Anyone that knows KD's Warriors knows that they were unstoppable. They had Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, the Splash Brothers. They had defensive genius Draymond Green. They had the best 6th man in the game, Andre Iguodala. And then, if all else failed, they had KD, who was there to close out the games. James Harden and Chris Paul managed to take them to 7 games. But in that 7th game, Chris Paul wasn't present. Harden shot poorly, leading to their knockout in the playoffs, and it seemed like the pressure had got to him. That was the end of the 17-18 season. In 18-19, this season would be different. James Harden's the MVP. He's averaging 36 points per game. He's on fire. James Harden, despite averaging 34 points that series, they couldn't overcome the hump. The Golden State Warriors were just too strong. They lost that series within 6 games. The 19-20 season was a complicated season due to COVID, and they made a trade for Russell Westbrook. Now, Russell Westbrook looked like a bad addition to the team because he couldn't make 3-point shots. However, he had proven that this team could still be contenders if he was on it. They were trying to make it work because at the end of the day, Russell Westbrook was still unstoppable at the rim. However, this team was constructed without a center, and if we're being honest with ourselves, that's a recipe for disaster. They would leave in the 2nd round to the Lakers, who go on to win the NBA championship, and James Harden would never overcome that hump. After those seasons, James Harden decided that he was going to look for a new team. He decided to join the Brooklyn Nets with KD and Kyrie. Never made it work. He decided to join Joel Embiid, and as we found out, he's running away. He's running back to Houston. Do we think that he is going to have a chance there? Do we think we might see the return of MVP James Harden? Only time will tell. For those of you that don't know James Harden, I hope I've given you some good insight to how good he actually was. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please like and comment. I'd really like to hear your opinions on this whole topic. I do think it's quite interesting that James Harden's going back, and until next time.